Good morning, everyone. Are you still okay? um, let's get going. As you can see in the program, if you have an electronic version of the program, this panel is a discussion about the deepening crisis of disinformation. Please allow me as a moderator to say a few words about the topic before I turn over the microphone to the panel members to give them the chance to elaborate some of the points they raised earlier. And before we open up the panel for everyone to ask some questions. Since the first conference on disinformation and democracy, a lot of studies, write-ups, and interventions have been produced by scholars, journalists, bloggers, and political analysts. And I trust that this year's conference, and in this year's conference, we have a better understanding of what fake news and disinformation are, and what can we do to resist them. I hope this panel will come to a consensus on this thing called the deepening crisis of disinformation. It appears that, as what Ellen said, and Sherwin also, disinformation is not only out to disrupt social media conversation or undermine the credibility of news media, but it can have an impact on democratic processes, especially elections. And still another disturbing development is that disinformation could threaten the safety and security of journalists, as what was shared by Sherwin, ranging from ridiculous legal charges to a ban on news coverage, and also death threats and anti-communist hysteria. And Sherwin said red tagging. Altogether, I call this disturbing development a form of social dismembering, which is really a nice way of saying that this country is dangerously imploding. Well, we'll have Ellen in the panel, who heads the independent news organization Bear Files, and Sherwin, of course, is from Northern Dispatch, and the third speaker is Stephen Butler. He is the Asia Program Coordinator of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Last week, CPJ led a mission in the country, and it came to a conclusion that there is increasing level of intimidation and a shrinking space for free press in the country. So he'll tell us more about this when he speaks. So each speaker is given, how many minutes? 10 or so? And to present their thoughts. But I think we should give the floor first to Stephen Butler of CPJ. Thank you.
Here we go. Now we're on, I think. Thank you very much. I live in Washington, D.C., and coming to Manila and hearing all of this talk about fake news just makes me feel right at home. I'll tell you a story. Maybe you have all heard the story of Pizzagate in the United States. It's a story about a pizza shop called Comet Ping Pong, which is actually my local pizza shop, and it's about a third of a mile from my house. And during the election, this fake news was promulgated that Hillary Clinton was keeping a child's sex slave ring in the basement of the, and it created a lot of fuss, and there were a lot of attacks, not just on that restaurant, but also restaurants, right around. And it ended up with someone having read this. It came into the pizza shop, and with firearms, and everyone else fled, and he ended up shooting into the floor with no good at all. And the reason I relate this is a well-known story, and it was thoroughly debunked. But I have family members and cousins who are Republicans, and they came to Washington for the inauguration. We ate dinner at a restaurant nearby, and I walked them through. And months afterwards, they were very curious to see what this place was like. And they looked for the basement. They couldn't find it because there is no basement. And they looked around, people eating pizza and playing ping pong, and that's the long and the short of it. But what you find is, even though the facts have been debunked, there's a kind of defensiveness and suspicion that lingers, and it has actually led to kind of estrangement within my family. over these issues. So it's the ramifications for this sort of thing can be very wide. As far as what we have done in the Philippines, we went around last week and we met with government officials and we met with a variety of journalists, and we also met with diplomats. And I think it's certainly true that the press is under a lot of pressure here, and it stems ultimately from the political situation in this country that all of you know, I think, much better than I do. And I think there's also a sense of, if not futility, of fear that things could get worse before they get better, particularly as the elections are approaching, which is always a time that creates tremendous danger for journalists anywhere in the world. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. And the first question maybe is, do you think that disinformation has deepened to a crisis level? And you think that the government or various sectors or the civil society groups have done a lot to eliminate it? I would like to probably give the floor to Ellen. What do you think? Yes, level. Yeah.
Well, the fact that we have a president who is a product of disinformation is already a crisis, right? Okay, na. The question is, has disinformation reached crisis level? The fact that we have a president who is a product of disinformation is, I think, is already a proof of that it has reached a crisis level. So now I think it's very important that we are holding this conference at the time when we are a few weeks, 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks before elections, because it's very important that when we go to the polls, we'll be equipped with the right information and not disinformation. Because yeah, I think it has reached a crisis level.
In our actual experience on the ground, we think that it indeed reached a crisis level because it has already affected some basic elements of democracy, such as free speech and even the right to organize. We have covered stories wherein people's organization were victims of the disinformation campaign, either by the local government unit, by the police, or by the military. And eventually, they were forced to stop their operation, to stop their campaign. In one particular example would be people's organization in Ilocos Sur who successfully opposed a dam project by the National Irrigation Administration just 2 years ago. Last year, most of their leaders were branded as NPA members and NPA supporters. Right after NIA was forced to retract the plan. So first came the accusations, them of being that. And then second was the enforcement of the military to put up a camp in that particular area. So the basic elements of when the basic elements of democracy is already affected by disinformation, then we can consider it a crisis. And the problem is the government, the institution that should be addressing this matter, is actually the one doing it. That makes it more worse and alarming.
Yeah. Stephen, do you see a regional or digital or regional international trend in the increase of digital intimidation? for example, just even in Asia?
Yes, I mean, each country is different in terms of the level and the degree of intimidation. But I think, disinformation and, intimidation by means of social media, I think the sad part of this is it actually works. The people who use this have been successful. And I think I consider myself a victim, and I think many of you do too. I think we've been unprepared. It's not our fault. But I have tremendous admiration for what Ellen and her organization are doing. It's a bit like, we need to learn to wash our hands before we eat or to brush our teeth afterwards. It's that kind of habit that consumers of news need to develop in order to protect themselves in this world. Because what we find across Asia and some of the European countries is the governments are trying to legislate criminal penalties for fake news, even though they are often the source of what we consider to be fake news. And so this is very likely to be turning into a new form of censorship. The social media companies have only slowly been accepting the fact that they are not just transmitters of information, but they are publishers, and that they need to exert some responsibility. And I think we're really just at the early stage of finding the means, the tools to which, for combating, this fake information. Now, fake news is not new, as many people have pointed out. But what is new is the almost zero cost of disseminating this information, and that is what needs to be addressed.
Okay, maybe for Sherwin and Ellen, when trolls attack your news organizations, did you experience, do these attacks undermine your ability to produce news and also hold the government accountable?
No, do these trolls undermine our ability to do our work as a fact checkers? No. But it's not something pleasant. I mean, it's not something that you welcome, right? But I'm very glad that in our website there are also followers in our website who answer the trolls. Well, we still have to find a way to effectively deal with the trolls, because some of us differ in how to deal with trolls. I think in our organization we have taken the stand to not to feed the trolls, but I don't know if that's effective. I don't know. We still have to assess our stand on that, because others I know what Sherwin does is pushback. They engage. They fight the trolls. So we have to deal with the we have to find a way to deal with the trolls.
Sherwin, what about you?
In the case of Nordis, we've never experienced any delays or problems in delivering our duty to the people while engaging. We say selective engagement of the trolls. When we say trolls, we in Northeast we identify it. There are what we call trolls, but are real person, and the bots or the fake accounts. So if we search them and find that they are actual accounts and actually looking for engagement, we first try to engage them privately. We even had an experience of through email, and after attacking us, the individual became our advocate. No, so it was just a matter of how you make engagement. For media institutions, I think they have social media guidelines. No, on the part of Nordis, we're still looking at our experience and trying to put up a better social media guidelines so that we can properly address the problem of trolls.
Stephen, in your report last week, CPJ said that there is an increasing level of intimidation and shrinking space for free press in the Philippines. Can you please elaborate a bit on that?
Well, as we know, there's a series of legal cases against Rappler. 11 have come in a very short period of time. And the subject, if you look carefully at the complaints, they appear to be rather technical violations. Certainly not, if they are violations at all, they appear to be rather technical and disputed points of law. And why have these come about? It's very difficult to believe that this is simply a product of a normal functioning of a law enforcement system. And if you extrapolate from that, much of the rest of the press corps is potentially at risk. And the fact that you have Rappler as a fine organization that has produced really daring investigative reports, they hold the line is what they're trying to do. Not everybody can hold the line under those kinds of threats. That's a fact. You go into newsrooms, and not just here, but everywhere throughout the region, which I do quite frequently. And people come up to me and they say, "Well, I've got a family." They have family, they have children to support. They're afraid of stepping out if they see an example made of one news organization. So this is just one aspect of what we see as the pressure that's being put on the press. It's not just Rappler. It's a message that's being sent to all news organizations, particularly those that take on establishment politicians.
Okay. Last question, then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. This is for Ellen and probably also Sherwin. Trolling and fake news have become acceptable campaign tactics this 2019 election. I think you've noticed it. And in fact, many political groups are using it as part of their election toolbox. What do you think? Is there anything we can do about this?
Acceptable?
Yeah,
I don't
because
think it has become acceptable. Thanks God, we have groups like Check that. Aside from the Facebook fact checkers, we have Check.ph, which composed of it's a bigger organization that does fact checking of candidates. So it has not become acceptable that candidates give us lies. And,
yes. But they're using it. They're using it as part of their
using it, and we are
election
here
campaign tactics.
That's what we are here for, right? To fact check and because we have learned our lesson in 2016. But it's something that is very it's a challenge fighting them, because look at the surveys. The top 12 all come from not all, because we have I think majority of the top 12 come from Hugpong, the administration allied party. And you have number 3, you have Bongo, who promises I don't think he knows what a job of a senator is, because he promises to put up malasakit centers and all that. That's not a job of a senator, but he does all the promises, and yet is number 3. That means people are victimized by all these false promises. So it's something. It's being used by candidates, and it's something to be concerned about.
What do you think? What about in the local level?
Yes, in the local level, I'm focusing now. Our report now is focusing for the 3 regions in Northern Luzon, but my particular task is in Ilocos. No? Actually, we're having a hard time, especially in a region where warlords thrive, because they are actually maximizing the social media to spread lies, spread misleading informations either to favor them or against their opponents. For example, one of our reports is on RA 7171. No? So, yes, tobacco excise tax. And two of the contending parties for the governorship is exposing each other's corruption. No? So actually, what we do is that what he says and she says report. No? But instead, we just state the facts of how many farmers have benefited from the tax, what have been the projects produced from the fund, and also other issues concerning the fund, because it's not just how they spend it, no, but actually what are their strategic plan on effectively use the fund. So that's how we handle it, because it's very dangerous when you just you know, election time, you just like a sponge for the media, you observe what they say. It would be not only affect your credibility, but also affect the informed for the voters to have an informed decision during the election.
Okay, it's time to take questions from the floor. Anyone who would like to ask questions to the speaker or probably give a comment related to what they discuss in the panel? Come on. Any question? Or any comment? Yes, please. Just identify yourself.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. My name is Kat from Manila Times.
It's not working. It's working, yes.
Hello. My name is Kat from Manila Times.
Yes.
Yes. My question is,
You want to use this mic?
hi, good morning. My name is Kath Modesto from Manila Times. I would just like to ask the panelists, do you think, Sir Stephen earlier said that in other countries there's crime penalties for disinformation. Like I think in Germany, Holocaust denial is a federal crime. Do you think it's time for the Philippines to have that already, because we don't? Yes. Thank you.
You're talking about regulating disinformation. What do you think, Stephen? What do you think of regulating disinformation, which some Asian countries really tried, right?
Yeah, it's a bad idea to have governments in charge of this. Even if a government passes this kind of legislation and sets up a mechanism with good intention, the people who follow, it's just an invitation for government abuse, to put critics in jail. This is the way. There needs to be a different method of regulating, and I think it would be a bad idea for the Philippines to go in this direction.
Okay. You want to say something?
I think it was last year, Senator Grace Poe conducted a hearing on fake news, because there was a bill filed by Senator Villanueva to regulate, attempt was to regulate fake news. I think the stand, as far as we're concerned, and I think it was shared by many other media organizations, that there's no need for a new law to fight fake news, because we have enough laws. We have the revised penal code, there's the libel law, and we have the cyber law. It's just a proper implementation. And what we are concerned about a new law is that it could be medicine worse than the disease. So we oppose regulation to fight fake news. There are other ways to fight fake news. Number one is education, but a new law, we oppose that.
Okay, there are groups, in fact, are doing media and news literacy, and I think they say it's a better way to fight disinformation rather than passing another punitive law. Okay, another question? Yes, please.
My name is James. I'm from Asia Center, which has offices in Bangkok and Malaysia. And we have just done a study on fake news legislations around the region. So I'm going to give a technical input here. So since 2017, all ASEAN member states have begun to convene select committee hearings, public hearings about introducing new legislations. There are two sets of legislation in the pipeline in the region. Countries that have elections are talking about fake news legislations. The three countries in our region that don't have elections in the way that we understand it, like Laos, Vietnam, and Brunei, they speak about cybersecurity laws. Two have published laws. Malaysia has a fake news bill. Singapore has introduced a deliberate online falsehood and manipulation, a bill for the first reading. The Malaysian law is still alive until it's finally disbanded once it goes back to the Senate, to Parliament after the Senate rejection. So I think there are legislation in place, and I think we should be mindful of the type of language they use in the legislation, because that's where we need to push back, right? Because I'm not advocating for legislation, I'm just giving a technical input. And the key issue here is that the definition of fake news in the laws are vague, and the state reserve its right to define what is fake. And I think that is the danger. Thank you.
Okay, what do you think of that? The definition of fake news is ambiguous, right? That's why leaving it up to the state or the government to define it is doubly dangerous, because they would use it for their own means. Same time, they would define propaganda as truth, right? How much time do we?
I would just add one
Okay.
comment to
Yes.
that, and that is that journalists make mistakes. I've made my share of mistakes over the years. And what you don't want is a bill that potentially criminalizes the ordinary mistakes that journalists make. A professional journalist should correct afterwards, but you don't want to criminalize making mistakes.
Yes, it's true, because it's prior restraint. Yes. One last question before we end the session. Anyone? Any comment? Yes, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Anna. I'm from the Foundation for Media Alternatives. I'm interested about Ellen's findings, stating that YouTube, I don't know if I heard it correctly, YouTube is the most common platform used for disinformation. There are a lot of people who would say that Facebook has a huge role in disinformation, so I'm curious how you would interrelate that with your findings in your study, as you shared earlier, and also how can we outline more the role of Facebook in this deepening crisis of disinformation?
Okay, two things there, Ellen. First is YouTube increasingly become a platform for disinformation, and then the other point is Facebook. What is it at this time in relation to the as a platform of disinformation?
Yeah, I heard, I mean, I don't have the data, but I understand that there are more, that fake news is much more prevalent in YouTube, and maybe because of the because of the nature of YouTube, the video, it's much more appealing to viewers, and I don't know if YouTube is doing something about it. Because at least with Facebook, we know that they're employing fact checkers, right? They're doing something about it. So, so that's what. So
Anyone who did a study on YouTube?
yeah, I haven't seen a study on how YouTube fights disinformation in YouTube. I haven't come across a study on that.
What about in Northern Luzon? Is YouTube also fast becoming a platform for disinformation?
For Northern Luzon, the most common platform being used is Twitter and Facebook, no? Especially Facebook. Um, in my case, in the case of Northern Dispatch, for example, all the attacks made against Northern Dispatch was through the Facebook accounts. No? Fake. We call it fake because no other information can be found about the account. Um, in a single post, for example, the one I showed you, that single meme was posted by 52 accounts, all made in a span of a month, no, with no other information about them. Tapos, within that circle lang umikot yung meme na yon. So, yun yung pinaka-common platform. So far, what we did to address that was to report in Facebook. And actually, it was in a day or two that those posts were taken down.
Okay. Yes, Verifiles, the Verifiles team is raising its, want to raise a point, maybe on YouTube as a platform of disinformation.
Hi, I'm from Verifiles. Just to clarify the YouTube part, yung question on the YouTube part. More than half of the video, more than half of the disinformation we analyzed, 193 stories, are in video format. That's why it's in YouTube mostly. But sinishare pa rin siya mostly through Facebook, Twitter, social media. It's just that yung mga videos na ito, it's a combination of like mishmashed news reports, nagtatamper ng logo ng legitimate mainstream media. It's really the format. But it's being shared mostly on Facebook.
So what are your insights on that? Why is it there's a shift on platforms from Facebook to YouTube?
It's not like a shift of platforms, ma'am. It's like the stories are shared on Facebook, but when you click on those links, they redirect to YouTube.
Okay.
It's really the format.
It's really the
format.
the form.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, that's Fiona Imperial. She's a member of our fact-check team sa Verifiles.
Yes. Yes, please. Gemma.
Yeah, I'm Gemma Mendoza from Rappler's Fact Check Group. So just to add to what Fiona said, YouTube is important. Facebook is important because people are there on Facebook. So that's the reason why mas concerned tayo with Facebook. But YouTube, as compared to Facebook in terms of audience size, is very minute in the Philippines, also because of internet. But yes, there's quite a lot. It's not precisely a shift, but there's quite a lot on both platforms.
Yes, there's another hand. Related to the issue, or is it a different comment?
Hi, I'm Rachel from Cagayan de Oro. I'm the chairperson of the Development Communication Department in Xavier University. I'm really interested on the red tagging, but it's still related to the issue because what's more dangerous, in Facebook, you're able to defend yourself actually. When we actually held the Democracy and Disinformation Seminar in Xavier University in January, that was Friday, the next day, Saturday, we presumed somebody who was part of the audience, posted a photo of the poster like this one and claimed that there was an ongoing NPA recruitment ongoing that day by the department. Because the department was very active and we have alumni everywhere, it was easily debunked. So people shared it and said it was not true. 3 months after, our freshman students went on an immersion. That's part of their photography class. In one of, a small town in Bukidnon, took photos. Not on Facebook, but on the day while the students were preparing for their exhibit in a mall in Cagayan de Oro. One of my students said that a box filled with two reams of long bond paper contained, claimed that the department was an active partner of the NPA, and that the immersion was really to partner with the NPA, that there were rituals made. It was scarier because in Facebook it was easy to debunk. But that one, that 2 reams of bond paper distributed, it's so hard to trace because the box was just 2 boxes were left. During the exhibit, we saw several military men roaming around because what they thought was the exhibit was some form of a propaganda. And prior to the exhibit, there were people checking our faculty members, especially the photography teachers, if they are really teachers and that. So even students, even our students were now scared on what to do, because although the mall security team was able to contain the distribution of the box, there were still papers distributed. And unlike on Facebook, where you have friends or people who knew what happened can easily debunk it, when you distribute flyers, it's so hard to debunk it. So it's really more on how do you deal with that one. And probably just a little context. It's I don't know if I can use the word scarier, but it's more dangerous there because we have martial law.
In Mindanao.
Yes, in Mindanao.
Ira was saying that the time's up. Yes, is it related to the point raised? Yes, please. And then probably we just wrap up after the comment.
I'm Marnie Tonson from the Philippine Internet Freedom Alliance.
Again, from
From the
that?
Philippine Internet Freedom Alliance, PIFA.
Great.
What she said is precisely the reason why the Supreme Court adopted several new writs into our system. What we have are the writs of amparo and the writs of habeas data. In red tagging, that's primarily the purpose of habeas data. What happened was, when the Supreme Court justices visited South America, they found out that the legal systems there created these new writs. And using the special rulemaking powers of the Supreme Court under Section 5 of Article 8 of the Constitution, what they did was they came out with these new writs. And this is precisely the experience in South America. You had red tagging. So what happened was they created the writ of amparo to protect the people who are red tagged, and the writ of habeas data in order to delete and remove false information from any record. And that's also addressed not only to government, but also to private entities. So I guess the answer to her question would be, you could file a petition for a
Legal
It-
remedy, yes.
of habeas data or amparo.
Okay. We have to wrap up. Maybe as a response to their comments, we just would like to ask you to say a couple of sentences as a challenge, probably, or as a response to the comments, and then we have to end this discussion. Yes, Steven, could you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I would just say that there's never going to be a resolution to this. It's kind of a war where you can win battles, but there's no end in sight except finding a way to live with it and make the best you can.
On the matter of red tagging, no, the word red has been used actually to degrade actually the meaning of dissent, and we should not let that happen. No, I remember a family of media practitioners in Mindanao who were red tagged. No? They claim it's a badge of honor, being red tagged. The Concorales, yes. A badge of honor, especially at the moment. So I think that's one way of pushing back, no, on the matter. Because if we let that tag, that terrorist tag, that red tagging, deter us from doing our job, then they would win.
please.
I'd like to go back to the question of Josa on has this information reached a crisis level? Yeah, I think so because under the president's anti-war, 27,000 people have been killed in the name of the president's drug war. 9 of our islands have been lost, and yet he is enjoying, my God, almost 80% popularity. How do you explain that? It's disinformation. So we need to work hard to fight disinformation.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us for this first panel. We just have opened the floor to for the discussion for the next panel. Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone.